I think we can all agree on the fact that we need to tax the rich. And I think we all understand the problems with money in politics and the oligarchy. And I think that we're finally coming together on that. And I love to see it.
Welcome to the Practivist Pod, the practice of activism made practical.
Today we talk about the constitutional crisis we have definitely entered, update on the SAVE Act, an update on the Republicans' terrible budget bill, and just an update on our overall mental health.
And then we talk about the Trump regime's legal challenges and their authoritarian impulse to ignore the rulings of the court with the founder of MSW Media and the host of the Daily Beans, Allison Gill.
I'm Jessica Craven.
I'm Steve Pearson.
Stay strong. It won't be long. Yeah, yeah. We will build a better world.
Okay, Steve, let's get into it. How are you doing on this very, very normal week? Just a normal, run-of-the-mill constitutional crisis. How you doing?
Nothing to see here. It's like I always think about the Naked Gun when the fireworks factory is exploding behind him, and he's like, "Please disperse. Nothing to see here, folks. Nothing to see." Yeah, I'm doing all right, and I do want to talk overall, and we'll talk about more in our reason for hope, but about just resilience and building resilience in this moment right now. I have an activist friend who is an influencer in Texas, in a very red area, fighting the good fight there. And she's had some health challenges. Her son has health challenges. They just lost access to health care. They're struggling financially. And, I'm so grateful for all the work that she's doing and so many other people are doing. And I also really want to give people space to take care of themselves and just know that, this work is always going to be there for us. Sadly, we're pulled between the fierce urgency of now, which is real, at this moment we're in, which is, horribly unique in our history, but also the fact that, the fight for social justice, the fight for, a better world and a more equitable society is always there. It's always a struggle. And so, I want people to be effective in what they're doing, and to be effective in this work, you really need to take care of yourself too.
Yeah.
So,
100% agree. It's a trope, and we've heard it many times, but it is this sort of sense of like the chorus singing, and everybody gets to pause for breath. Like no one can hold a note forever. Like we all take pauses, and the possibilities for burnout are real right now. They are. And everybody has moments where they feel completely overwhelmed. I did a TikTok live on Friday, and towards the end of the live, we'd been talking about, all these stressful things that were happening. And one of the commenters was like, "So how are you doing right now?" And I said, "How am I doing?" And then I just burst into tears on the live. Like this is me. I'm a very emotional person, and I'm not like embarrassed by it.
Yeah.
But it's hard. Like it's hard for all of us. Even, we can be hopeful people. I think you and I are both basically optimistic personalities, and we keep fighting. But yeah, like everybody needs to practice self-care. And sometimes that looks like just having a good cry, or like punching a pillow, or going on a really big run so you can get stuff out of your system. But yeah, definitely. It doesn't do any good to pretend that this is not hard, because it is hard. It's hard. It's very hard.
It's hard because we are compassionate people.
Yeah.
And we care about each other. And when we see, what we're about to talk about, the disappearing of folks to this torture prison in El Salvador. And I just think about the immigration crisis that we deal with, writ large. People, seeking asylum, fleeing from violence and poverty and desperation, and being met by this administration that is just so brutal and cruel to these people that are suffering. And as compassionate humans, it's hard not to internalize that and have our hearts broken by that all the time. So it's important that we take care of ourselves too and find the right cadence for this, because that's the task of an authoritarian regime, is to break people down and break their will. So
right. And the since we know that this is a endurance game, right? Like that the famous article that everybody's passing around by Erica Chenoweth, where she talks about the 3.5% rule, like if you can get 3.5% of the populace engaged, you're very likely going to succeed. And I believe will get there, probably sooner than later, just because of the way things are going. But she also says, like, the sustained movements are more successful than the sudden upheavals, that it is the sustained movements that are effective. The multiple strikes and the multiple protests. And so it is like, we're just not going to succeed in a day. It just can't. It's just the way it is. So it is an endurance game, and that means all of us need to take breaks to rest. Like, all of us. There's nobody who is superhuman enough to keep going all the time with this. There just isn't. So, yeah. That's
right. Even if you think you are, take your breaks. Yep. We need you. We need you walking by our sides for the long haul. Sure. But speaking of this sustained movement, there is another rally this weekend, this Saturday, 50-50 what's the website? 5050.1. I think it is a new website, but we'll have the link there. And, we want to keep these going. We want to, show that the movement is sustained, because that's frankly, what they're afraid of right now is us, the power that we have coming out, en masse. So, but let's talk about, what we're protesting right now, because there's a lot. Yeah. Well, right now, we talked about at the beginning being in a constitutional crisis, and it is. I actually looked up the definition of a constitutional crisis yesterday because I was making a video and I wanted to just be sure that I was, explaining it properly. Not just hyperbole. Right. Yeah. Well, and there are many different ways that it can manifest itself. Sometimes it's just a situation where it's really unclear who has the authority, the president or the courts. But there has always been this line, as I've understood it, that should Donald Trump openly defy the Supreme Court, that is the definition of a constitutional crisis. And that's where we are. We are in that moment where the Supreme Court has ruled unanimously. It wasn't even like a split decision, 9-0, that the Trump administration must bring back this, I'm sure people probably know the background at this point, but this man who is a longtime resident of the U.S., legally protected to be here, in fact, has been, protected by a judge to not be sent back to El Salvador, fled gang violence, father of 3 children, all of whom have disabilities, married to a U.S. citizen, picked up wrongly through an administrative error, and has been sent to essentially a gulag, a torture prison in El Salvador. And the Trump administration has been ordered to bring him back. And they're saying, we just won't. We won't. They're lying and saying he is a gang member when there is absolutely no evidence to suggest that. And in fact, the only person who said that he was a police officer who has since been fired for misconduct. He has no criminal record here or in El Salvador. He's never been accused of a crime. He's a father. He's a churchgoer. He's a union member. And the Trump administration made a mistake. And essentially, because they are a bunch of bullies, can't admit it. And so they're just leaving him there. And that brings us to the constitutional crisis that we're in. And of course, there have been all of these other arrests and deportations and disappearances of students traveling here on visas, literally who have just said something that the Trump administration disagrees with. And it is a moment, I think, where many people in America are waking up and going, whoa, we are. And of course, Trump has said now that he's interested in doing this kind of thing to American citizens. Homegrown, and I think everybody has woken up very quickly to the fact that, like, this could go very south very quickly, even more than it already has. So that's the constitutional crisis that we face. Yeah. Yeah, and I talk about this a lot in the interview with Allison Gill, and she actually frames the Supreme Court decision in an interesting way because, which gave me a little bit of hope, because the Supreme Court actually gave the administration some wiggle room in how it came down on that decision. So there's still some terms that need to be defined, and there was a hearing yesterday. And so, in the spirit of the decision, absolutely the Trump administration is defying it. And we are, I believe, in a constitutional crisis right now. But there's still some legal semantics, some loopholes that the Supreme Court decision left open for exploitation. So that's both hopeful because, hopefully they can refine that and really make it explicit. And then, the Trump is either explicitly defined the Supreme Court's order or they're not. But we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a scary moment. I mean, this is a pattern we've already seen. Trump is also still not allowing the AP reporters back into the press room, even though a court has ordered that they must be allowed in. They're ignoring the courts. I mean, and we all know it. We all see it. We can say that, yes, the Supreme Court did not write their ruling as effectively as they might have. But we all know what's happening here. And I think that more and more Americans are waking up to the fact that this is happening. And interestingly, I'm sure you've seen the same polling that I've seen in the last 24 hours or so.
I was just going to say it. Yeah.
Not popular. People are not into it. They really are not. And Trump has this whole, American people love my deportation policies. It's not true. They love, in theory, deporting violent criminals who are undocumented. Once you start drilling down below that, they're much more ambivalent. And what Trump is doing right now, they are wholly opposed to. It's a very tiny percentage of Americans who support what is happening right now with ignoring the courts, deporting people who have lived here for a long time peacefully, married to a U.S. citizen spouse with kids. Like, people don't like this. This is not what people signed up for. So
his approval ratings are the lowest they've ever been in his entire presidency, including last term. Yeah. And his approval ratings on immigration are very, very low. And that's their bread and butter. That's what he ran on. Yeah. If you'll remember, I know you remember, but we had a bipartisan immigration bill that was pretty hardcore that, went farther than a lot of us Democrats wanted, but it was a compromise bill, and he squashed it because he wanted to run on the problem, the quote unquote problem of immigration. Yeah. And so it's been his bread and butter, and he's underwater there too, because of the abject cruelty of what's happening and the defiance. The New York Times this morning was talking about his defiance of these court rulings, and also the inept administration, the Justice Department, when they're going before these court rulings, because it creates this conundrum for judges because they're not acting in good faith. They're lying in court. So how do they confront that? And from the New York Times, it said in the past, most presidential administrations had high win rates in court for actions involving federal agencies, close to 70% before Trump's first term in office. By contrast, since Trump took office in January, the government is winning only about 30% of the cases so far, with the court stopping 58 executive orders and allowing 26 to go forward. Yeah. So we're at a real crossroads where it's clear to the American public, it's clear to the courts that we are on the side of the rule of law here, but the administration is they're not playing. They're not playing. They want to go full on authoritarianism, and it's up to us to again get out in the streets, make some noise, and make sure that we don't let that happen.
Right. And if I were talking to a Trump supporter, once I had, because of course they've been fed Fox News talking points. He's a gang member. Right. He's not. There's absolutely no evidence of it. And if there were evidence, why wouldn't they come and show it in court? Okay. So not a gang member. They're saying there's nothing that they can do. Oh, yes, there is. Absolutely. We're weaker than El Salvador. Really? We can't get someone back? Of course we can. But also it'd be good
There's a history of us doing that too.
Exactly. We're still the United States. We can do what we want, essentially, within reason, for better or for worse. But the other thing is, how would you feel if a Democratic, administration decided to punish you in 4 years? Like, when Trump is out of office and there's a Democratic president, what if we decide that everybody who supported Trump should go to a gulag with no due process? Will you be okay with that? Is that the way it's going to work? Like,
habeas corpus is the foundation of our country.
it's everything.
The fact that we get due process is the foundation of our democracy.
Yeah.
And even for, gang members who, if it is someone who came from a gang and has allegedly committed a crime here in the U.S., they are entitled to due process just like everybody else.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, well, the scary thing, obviously, is about 70% we're seeing reporting of the folks that have been disappeared and put in that El Salvadorian torture prison have not committed any crimes in the U.S. Other than seeking asylum and coming across illegally, I guess. But that's their only crime, and in some cases, not even that.
Yeah, it's not a crime to seek asylum. I mean,
it's not a crime to seek. Yeah, exactly. It's not a crime, and there's a process, and they're actively engaged in that process. And
one of these people that got picked up yesterday or the day before was at his citizenship
on the way to his hearing. Yeah,
I mean, doing all the things, and that, I mean, it's so vile. I mean, I don't need to say this. We all know this. I assume if you're listening to this podcast, you know this, but I do think that there will be very severe consequences for people who supported these policies in years to come. I do think that this is going to age very badly. The people who work for these government officials are going to have a hard time getting employment. Unless we just enter a really, truly dark age that lasts for a long time, when this thing circles back, it is going to be a very bad look to have been anywhere near the Trump administration and these policies.
Their cruelty will stand the test of time. It will be in our history books, and they can try to erase that history, but it will not be kind to them.
No, it will not. It will not. It cannot,
So let's talk about the functioning of government, which is sort of barely a thing right now, but there still is a government, happening. And we've talked about it in the last few weeks, the SAVE Act and the budget reconciliation bill. Both are still active right now. The SAVE Act obviously passed through the House, which we knew it would, but we are hopeful that it will get stopped in the Senate. And, I kind of have, we have to, I want you to talk about, who needs to hear from us in the Senate and everything too. But I sort of have a theory, with a lot of these voters, suppression bills, I'll call them, because they're not rooted in any kind of need for new voting laws. It's already illegal for non-citizens to vote. We know there's no instances, substantial instances of voting fraud. And these are like bills in search for a problem, but I think to the larger point, they are bills that are seeding doubt in our elections, and that's what they consistently want to do. And I think they know really that the SAVE Act has very little chance of getting passed, but the more they have that out there, that we need voter ID, that we need that kind of protection for our vote, it gets through. I had a friend of mine who's not super engaged, who is a Democrat, because I'm a Democrat, but, it does seem like a good idea to have, voter ID so they can check and make sure that you're a citizen if you're voting, and that's coming from an uninformed person who's just hearing that hammered at them. And I think that's really what the point of the SAVE Act and these voter suppression bills are, is to sow doubt. Yeah.
Right. And the average person still, I saw someone sent me a screenshot of a Facebook post by a right-wing person debunking Democrats' talking points about the SAVE Act. And I didn't even read most of it, but I know one of the big features was this undocumented people are voting in huge numbers. And this has been debunked so many times. And the article I always send people is from the Cato Institute, which is a libertarian right-wing think tank. They did an article called, I think it's called debunking the myth of, non-citizen voting. But basically they said that their studies had shown that basically the percentage, if you had to get it down to a single digit, was 0. They were like, it's slightly above 0, but it's so close to 0 that you couldn't even say it's 1%. It is vanishingly non-existent. And this is coming from the Heritage Foundation has found the same thing. They've all found the same thing. They're just, even when Mike Johnson talks about it, he's like, well, it's very hard to prove. It's hard to prove because it's not happening.
Right.
It's just very, very frustrating. And yes, and this is not even just a voter ID bill, though. This is not about like when you go to vote, you have to present a driver's license, which is one thing. And there's an argument to be made against voter ID or for it. Like that's a separate argument. This is a registration ID, registration proof of citizenship. And there are only 2 things you can use, a passport or a birth certificate. That's a whole other ball of wax for the 21 million Americans who just don't have those documents, but are citizens.
Or the 69 million women. who have taken their husband's name.
Yeah, who literally would, if they'd even just moved to a different county and have to re-register to vote, would be out of luck if they happen to live, because the state sort of gets to decide what they can use instead. Well, if you're in a state like Georgia and you're a Democrat from a Democratic district, sorry, you're going to be out of luck. But the Republicans over in that district, they're fine. Like it's just a formula for voter suppression. It is such a disaster. But I do want to tell you, so the good news is that Indivisible published a list a few days ago of the Democratic senators that they thought needed work. And I turned around and put that list in my newsletter. And it was both of the New Hampshire senators, Shaheen and Hassan. I believe it was both of the Nevada senators. It was Warnock, which I found surprising.
Me too.
Peters from Michigan, and Kelly from Arizona, which I believe adds up to 7, which is exactly the number of votes we cannot lose, right? We can lose 6, we can't lose 7 because of the filibuster. So the good news is that I got many emails from readers yesterday about the New Hampshire senators, that both of them, their offices had pushed back very hard and said, no, we are absolutely voting no on this bill. So that's 2 out of that list. Cortez Masto also sounds like she is a hard no. And then somebody spoke to Warnock's office and they told them that he was also a no. That's only one person. I'd like to hear it from more. But it sounds like we are whittling that list down. Now, Newsweek suggested that there should be a couple of other senators on that list. Angus King does seem to be undeclared. Fetterman, because he is a nightmare, always needs to be watched. And maybe Gallego, because he also has been really shaky. So if any of those are your senators, the ones who I've said are still wobbly or not sure, this is the week to absolutely deluge them with calls insisting that they vote no. Yep. And if you find out that one of those people is voting no, let us know so that we can let Indivisible know and we can focus our energies elsewhere.
There we go. All right. Well, thank you for that. Let's see. What next?
Well, we were going to talk quickly about the budgeting process. I got more information on the timeline for people who are interested. That, so again, the budget resolutions passed last week. We talked about that. The process now is they're going to be going in and hammering out the details. It sounds like the House of Representatives is going to be taking the lead. And let's remember that the Republicans in the House are more keen to make steep cuts than the Republicans in the Senate. The Republicans in the Senate are really, really worried about these Medicaid cuts. They know that it is a very bad thing for their constituents, whereas the House, they're like frothing at the mouth. They're dying to make these cuts. They just want it so badly.
It was the Senate that saved the Affordable Care Act in the first Trump term. Yeah.
And it may be some of those same senators. I mean, obviously not McCain, but Collins is going to come into play again. Murkowski is going to come into play. Tillis is going to come into play. These purple state senators or senators who are up in 2026. Maybe you remember the full list of Republicans who are up in 2026. I think Tillis is, but I don't remember who else. Maybe Susan Collins.
Don't put me on the spot. I don't have
sorry,
that off the top of my head.
We can get back to that. But the fact is, right now, the House will be writing for the next couple of weeks. Then they're going to come back with a version that Mike Johnson wants to have passed by the end of May. Then it's going to go to the Senate. They have to accept that version, which is really it's a little doubtful that this is going to go smoothly for the Republicans. So I guess all of that is to say that when people say, who are not paying as much attention, like, have they gutted Medicaid? Has it happened yet? The answer is no, that is definitely the goal. It's definitely the goal to cut $880 billion from Medicaid, $230 billion from SNAP. Those numbers are set. Whether or not it gets done, though, it's going to take at least 2 more months before we know for sure. And we are going to play a big role in whether or not it actually happens, because we are going to get to make a gigantic stink every step of the way. And remind people over and over again, Republicans want to add $5 trillion minimum to the deficit in order to give tax cuts to people like Elon Musk and Shell Oil and, every giant corporation you can think of who are already paying virtually no taxes, all while paying for it by cutting Medicaid, cutting Head Start, cutting, college loans, Pell Grants they want to come for. And then also the tariffs, which are essentially another way for Republicans to fill that deficit gap. So you are paying this sales tax on things you buy so that Elon Musk can get that tax break. And it's that simple. And that message, when we convey it to people, almost 70% or 75% of Americans across parties hate all of that. They don't want any of that. So
they're
it's
not
just
a big
our
fan
job
of
to
the
communicate.
oligarchs.
Yeah, nobody
it's
wants
our
this.
job. And as of today, the ruble went up over the dollar. So yeah. So there's no one happier or living a better life right now than Vladimir Putin and all the Russian oligarchs who are now gleefully trolling Americans on social media and the like, and so. And yesterday, of course, was tax day. So, a lot of us actually had to pay taxes. And, I like paying taxes for programs like Head Start, for SNAP, for, assistance, for things that not only align with my values and help my community, but I know are great for our economy, because when we give people a chance to contribute to our economy, guess what? They do. They contribute and make our economy even bigger and better for everybody. So, it's
a tough pill to swallow this year. To pay taxes. I agree. It's terrible. I really don't want to be doing it, but I am, of course, for the record.
Yeah. So the Center for American Progress has a great breakdown on the budget process, because it does go into various committees who are worried about different items, and there's a lot of pressure points there. So I'm going to post that article into our show notes too, and I recommend people check that out. It'll really give you a deeper understanding if you want to get into the weeds a little bit more on the budget reconciliation process.
That's a lot. I'm so deep in the weeds. I'm coughing up weeds all the time. I spend all my time in the weeds with this.
You live in the weeds. You need allergy shots constantly or something, or some herbal tea. I don't know what helps with that, but it is springtime.
Neti pot.
All right. Speaking, get your neti pots out, read that article, and speaking of springtime, which is a hopeful time, a time of rebirth, what's your reason for hope?
Oh, well, my reason for hope this week is the fact that Harvard and Stanford and Yale and Rutgers University have all decided to stand together against the Trump administration. And it seems like not that big of a deal, but it is so huge because we're seeing so little courage right now. And, I think what we've talked about before is that we're finding that both courage and fear are very contagious, right? So when one person gets afraid who's kind of in a leadership position and they cave, a lot of others cave as well. But Harvard decided to take a stand when the Trump administration came after them. It was their turn in the barrel, and Trump came after them, and they said, we're not going to do this. We're not going to cave to you. And then Yale stood up next to them, and Rutgers is trying to get some sort of, organization together where they all stand together. And this is what we've been needing. We need this from the press. We need this from law firms. We need this from every group that is being targeted, that if you stand together, they can't touch you. It is when people peel off and make deals that the whole institution is weakened. Paul Weiss will go down in history. It's shameful, a shameful abdication, a surrender, disgusting. If they were the last law firm on earth, I would not hire them because of what they've done. These names will go down in history on the good side or the bad side. Harvard made a choice and they will be on the good side, and bless them for it. I don't always like Harvard, and I definitely don't always like their graduates, but they did the right thing. And so I really recommend people send them a thank you email. It's pretty easy to find that contact information, or it's in my newsletter, or we can put it in the show notes, but thank them. It's not easy to be the first to take a stand, but now others are joining them, and we want to really make that feel good for them so that more come along and do the same thing. So that's my reason for hope. What is yours, Steve?
Well, me too. I mean, Allison and I talk about that too. And if you haven't had an opportunity to read the letter that Harvard put out, it's actually one for the ages. It's a really beautiful statement of their values and our values collectively, and the importance of higher education. Of course, again, this is fascism 101, is to attack education, attack higher education. And so thank God they're standing up, and other institutions are rallying around them. I just want to say, it's not really a reason for hope, but I want to go back to where we started in terms of self-care, because with all of this horrific stuff that is happening, it's really difficult, but also essential to talk about self-care. And like I talked about earlier, I always think about organizing through the lens of efficacy, and I want to make sure that what we're doing is effective and moving us forward. And the idea of the Practivist of our show is that we make activism a practice. Like a regular part of our life, but also that it's practical, that aligns with our talents, our passions, and very importantly, our bandwidth too. And like I talked about, I'm seeing a lot of us understandably struggling with the trauma that we're experiencing collectively. And I don't have an answer for how you don't do that, and I'm certainly not going to tell someone how they should or shouldn't feel. But I just want to reinforce the importance of taking time for yourself to process those feelings in whatever way is best for you. And we talked about Kamala Harris as being a joyful warrior. And that's a term that I'd heard a lot because I relate to it a lot. I feel like I'm a joyful warrior too. And I really do find joy in this work, especially when I'm in community with other activists. But this morning I read about being a compassionate warrior, and I think it's really important. So I want to share what I read. This is from author Sean Harvey. Compassion is most easily defined as the feeling or emotion when a person is moved by suffering or distress of another and by the desire to relieve the suffering. Taking a step further, to be compassionate to others, we must begin by learning how to be compassionate to ourselves. I thought that was very important, because it's that, like, what do we have to give if we're depleted, if we're not able to, to give of ourselves? And then this article went on to quote a Tibetan Buddhist master named Chogyam Trungpa. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. His understanding of compassionate warriorship. Warriorship here, said Trungpa, does not refer to making war on others. Aggression is the source of our problems, not the solution. He goes on to say, here the word warrior is taken from Tibetan Pawo, which literally means one who is brave. Warriorship in this context is the tradition of human bravery or the tradition of fearlessness. Warriorship is not being afraid of who you are. So I'm going to encourage all of our listeners to be compassionate warrior. That means having compassion for ourselves and giving ourselves the space we need, and, so that we can build that greater strength to persevere and be more effective in our service to others. So that's my wish for you. That's the practice that I'm going to take because I need it this week. It has been a tough one and a really scary one. Yeah, that was great. Beautiful. Speaking of compassionate warriors and relentless, brave voices, here comes my interview with Allison Gill. Dr. Allison Gill is an award-winning political podcaster and the founder and CEO of MSW Media, our network. She's also known for being a whistleblower, stand-up comedian, writer, musician, and one of the hottest voices in today's progressive political media. I had to keep that part of the bio in there. Allison, my friend, it is good to see you.
It's good to see you. I didn't write that. I don't know who wrote that, but
I think it was at a Netroots appearance or something I pulled from the internet, but I was like, that's absolutely right. She brings the fire every day.
oh yeah, just as long as we could stop using the word firebrand about people, I think I'm fine with whatever anybody writes about me.
Fair enough. It's really good to see you. It's a really, really scary day to be talking to you. I mean, it's been a scary, month, but seeing that we're smack dab in the middle of a constitutional crisis, I'd really like to lean on you to give us a breakdown of what's happening in the courts this week. Obviously, the Trump regime is openly defying the unanimous Supreme Court decision to bring home Kilmer Armando Albrego Garcia. If Trump is able to just disappear people without due process and in defiance of the courts, then we are in a full authoritarian state. Trump also said this week that he wants to go after homegrown terrorists next, and that he needs to build more prisons in El Salvador. So as we're recording this, there is a hearing about to happen in about half an hour for Mr. Abrego Garcia's case. What is next for SCOTUS? Where are we going to go from here?
Yes. First, I want to caution everybody. I've got my pencil. I want to caution
I feel scolded.
everybody. I want to caution everybody talking about how, when we talk about Trump defying a unanimous Supreme Court order, that's that sort of lets the Supreme Court off the hook for what they did last Tuesday in their unanimous ruling. And I wrote about this on Substack, MuellerSheWrote.com. Is it really unanimous? Because the three liberal justices said we wouldn't have even picked this application up. We would have denied it outright. But the conservative justices swooped in and made some rules, but they made them vague enough to give wiggle room to Donald Trump. So is he in defiance of a Supreme Court order? In spirit, yes, as Steve Vladeck writes for One First, but technically no, because the Supreme Court, the conservative arm, said, yeah, you have to facilitate, the court can tell you to facilitate the return of Abrego Garcia. However, we don't like the lower court's use of effectuate. We want to remand to the lower court to further define what it means to effectuate. And they said this sentence, with due regard and deference to the executive's inherent power to deal with foreign affairs. And what that particular sentence does is it allows Donald Trump and the Trump administration to say, the deference we're due, you must show me due regard. I have decided that what deference and due regard means is that I don't have to do anything to effectuate the return. Now, that is obviously against the spirit of the ruling, but it's not technically against it, and so they'll have to go back up to the Supreme Court for clarification. They also, said that enough reasonable time has to be given for anyone to file a habeas petition to prevent being deported under an Alien Enemies Act proclamation, but they didn't define what a reasonable amount of time is. Donald Trump could say, I gave them 30 minutes, that's reasonable. And here we are. The Supreme Court did this in the immunity ruling.
Or even, not to interrupt, but also they didn't address whether the use of the Alien Enemies Act is appropriate at all, which is, I guess, key to all of this.
Yeah, it very well could be. So what's going to happen today, actually in about a half an hour, I know this comes out on Thursdays, but on Tuesday, there's going to be a hearing in Judge Ginnis's courtroom. Judge Ginnis did, after the Supreme Court made their ruling, their unanimous ruling, Judge Ginnis, it was kicked back down to her, and she said, okay, you have until 9:30 tomorrow, which was last Friday, to tell me where he is, what you're doing to bring him home, and what steps you're going to continue to take to make sure that he comes back immediately. That was her order. Now, Trump is saying, and the Trump administration is saying, no, Supreme Court says you owe me due regard and deference because I am very powerful, all powerful. And so we're not going to do anything. He's in the sovereign control of El Salvador, and even though we can invade Greenland and Panama and make Canada a 51st state, we can't possibly have any power over what El Salvador, the mighty El Salvador, does. It's bonkers, but she's holding that hearing today because the Trump administration failed to follow her orders. They were late to get those 3 questions answered. They didn't answer the 3 questions. Then she said, all right, well, you're going to have to tell me every day by 5 p.m. They were late Saturday filing that. They were on time Sunday, but they didn't answer the 3 questions. They were late by an hour on Monday and completely, refused to answer any questions about what they're doing to effectuate or to facilitate the return of Abrego Garcia. So we'll know a lot more by the time this show comes out, and there's going to be certain things that I'll be looking for Judge Ginnis to do in this hearing.
So you mentioned maybe one of the things that she could do is define those terms in a more specific way to kick back up to the Supreme Court, because give the Supreme Court the teeth to really either affirm what she's saying or make clear of those terms, because it seems like the way that you've laid it out, they really gave themselves a lot of wiggle room, which on its face makes me a little bit more relaxed, because we don't want him to be an open defiance of the Supreme Court, because that's where it's just all completely fallen apart. But we do need that showdown at some point. So when is that going to happen?
Yeah, and that's kind of what they did in the immunity ruling, right? They were like, absolute immunity, presumptive immunity for official acts, lower court, you have to figure that out. And when they said lower court, you have to figure that out, what that did was it guaranteed that it would have to come back up to the Supreme Court once the lower court decided what to do. So the lower court in this case is currently deciding what to do. She may force a couple of people with knowledge to come in and testify, like Kristi Noem or Stephen Miller. She might hit them.
I have a reaction when that name's mentioned.
She might hit them with escalating sanctions, a fine that will increase daily until they take a step they didn't even bother asking El Salvador to return Abrego Garcia, and she
should demand that they every day they don't respond, that they take away some more money from his birthday fund, from the birthday parade.
His birthday military parade, right?
Yeah, that might have some teeth.
Yeah. So whatever she decides or rules, it will eventually make it up to the Supreme Court again. But meanwhile, the problem with the Supreme Court just not flat out refusing to grant the application to vacate Judge Ginnis's original order, the problem with that is, in the meantime, we have an innocent person who has not been being given due process under the Constitution of the United States. And by the way, you don't have to be a citizen. You could be a non-citizen, undocumented person who's committed a million crimes. You still get due process in the United States. Even visitors, people visiting, if you're in the United States and something happens, you're afforded due process under the Constitution. That sort of battle is what we need eventually to go up to the Supreme Court. But like I said, in the meantime, he's in this torture prison. We don't know if the government has said he's alive and he's there. That's the only question of the 3 questions that she asked that was answered. But he's there being, it's torturous and awful. Plus there's, a couple hundred other people that were sent there improperly that we're still waiting to see if there'll be any relief for.
Yeah. I mean, by different reporting, 75% of the people who were sent there have not been convicted of any crimes or and it's terrible.
Even if they have, there's still reported. You can't just disappear them without due process.
Foundation of our
And Pam Bondi just got a judge to dismiss the charges against that one guy. She had a big old press conference last week saying, we arrested one of the major leaders of MS-13. He's being arraigned in court right now on multiple charges. They dropped all the charges against him so that they can deport him without due process. That's not how we do things in the United States. If you are here and you commit a crime, we arrest you. We give you due process. You have the presumption of innocence. You get a lawyer appointed if you can't afford one. There are, a great grand jury has to return a true bill, and then you have a judge assigned to you. You file pretrial motions. If the case survives pretrial motions, you go to a petit jury, a trial, and then if you're convicted and sentenced, you have the right to appeal your case. You serve your time here in the United States, and then if you're done, if you're not here legally, then you're deported, because the Constitution tells us that's how we have to do it. So this is just, again, when you say constitutional crisis, we're smack dab in the middle of finding out very soon whether or not we are full-blown authoritarianism.
Yep. Well, let's talk about some other cases now that give me a little bit of hope to see some active defiance against this regime. And that's our educational institutions, led by Harvard. Finally, someone standing up to Trump's unconstitutional demands. And now he is threatening to tax Harvard as a political entity after he froze $2.2 billion in funds. Didn't some Supreme Court justices go to Harvard? Anyway, it is hopeful, however, to see other institutions like MIT and Columbia et al. Banding together. I mean, the attack on higher education is just like a terrifying, chilling example of straight up fascism. What can you tell us about how this is developing, and also like how we can help, just as folks listening in, how we can amplify this and give these institutions our support?
Well, anybody who's studied any little bit of history can see that, first you fascinate the fools, then you muzzle the intellects. They're dismantling the Department of Education. They're going after learning institutions. And then you attack the Fourth Estate and either that or own it, which is kind of, we're half and half right now.
We're both. Yeah.
Right. Then, you try to divide, the electorate by attacking first trans people, then gay people, and that extends to women, and then other marginalized communities, people of color, get everybody arguing. That's been going on forever. But it's plain as day right now with the diversity, equity, and inclusion and accessibility attacks, right? So, and then you muzzle the arts, right? You take away punk rock time. You take away the Joe Strummers of the world. You take over the board at the Kennedy Center. You shut down museums and libraries, because that's where ideas about resistance and being a dissident are born. And so that's why I'm very thankful that you do shows like yours. It's why I do shows like mine, so that we can keep the information out there, so that so that this regime has a harder time isolating us from one another by taking away our education, our arts, and our humanities, and our due process, our right to due process. And I like people who aren't quite aren't seeing it. I'm very confused by that. It's plain. Mm-hmm. It's plain as day to me, but I love that the Big Ten Compact that they're working on, the fact that Cornell, MIT, Harvard, a handful of these law firms are pushing back and banding together. I love to see it. I wish some of our leadership would do more and be more vociferous. We do have a lot of Democrats that are. I would like to see more of that to help these institutions and provide assistance just by using their pulpits, just their voices, the power that they have inherently as an elected representative to help stand up for these institutions, for the Fourth Estate, for the universities, for the law firms, for the people that are being robbed of due process. As we speak, it's frightening, and I'm glad to see this happening, and that gives me a lot of hope.
Yeah, I mean, any of these electeds who went to any of these schools, they're certainly going to be getting some calls right now, at the very least from the Alumni Association, asking for some money. So it's going to be an expensive proposition for them if they don't stand up. But
hey, can we put up $2.2 million? That would be great.
Exactly. But yeah, I mean, you dovetailed right into kind of what I wanted to ask you and what we always end up these conversations with, and that's what's bringing you hope. And I'm seeing, in the midst of this open defiance or reinterpretation, we'll say, of these judicial rulings, the courts have pretty consistently been ruling against this regime and their ridiculous EOs and whatnot. So. Are there particular cases that are giving you hope, or what's just in general giving you the most hope right now?
Honestly, if I've learned anything from, following the Mueller investigation, Department of Justice,
Yeah.
Jack Smith, all of that.
You've been like Lucy with the football, waiting for this to come down on this guy,
That we can't, we're definitely all Charlie Brown at this moment. But that we
Right.
can't really rely solely. There's no magic bullet. There's no silver bullet. We can't rely solely on any institution. We can't rely on the courts to save us. So when you ask what cases are bringing me hope, I'm just following them to see where they lead. What brings me hope is us. The people, these Tesla takedown rallies, April 5th, hands off, coming up April 19th, another 50501 day of protest.
Yep.
And we have to make sure that when we do these protests, we're not just out there holding signs and yelling. We're getting each other's emails. We're putting together a coalition. We're doing training on how to organize at the grassroots level so that come next summer, before the midterms, we can, take all of those people that we've met, bring everyone en masse to Washington, D.C. So the people are bringing me hope, seeing all of these people out there exercising their First Amendment rights. The polls, for the first time ever, I think, Trump is upside down on immigration policies. More people disapprove of his handling of immigration than approve of it. That's never happened. He's way underwater in with the economy. Given the tariffs and the back and forth and the uncertainty, the market loves uncertainty, right?
Oh yeah.
And so that's the people are starting the huge AOC rallies. I think she's the future of our party.
For sure.
She reminds me of a young junior senator from Chicago who spoke at the 2004 convention after we lost, and then came back and won in a landslide in 2008. That's the vibe I'm getting. Not necessarily that I think AOC should run for president, but she should run for something. She needs to be in leadership positions, and the old guard needs to let her do that. Step aside and let her do that. But that's my hope is the people, everybody's voice, demanding hands off and change. And I think we're finally coming together against the common theme of the oligarchy versus trying to find our political positions that we may or may not agree on. I think we can all agree on the fact that we need to tax the rich. And I think we all understand the problems with money in politics and the oligarchy. And I think that we're finally coming together on that. And I love to see it.
I love to see it too. And that's what gives me the most hope and fires me up, is seeing everyone come out into the streets and make their voices heard. And like you said, get each other's contact info, sign up for organizations and campaigns, because the push to win back the House in the midterms starts right now. We can't wait, because Republicans certainly are not waiting. They're already investing a lot of money in these seats. So, but more on that as we go along. And Allison, I'm so grateful for everything that you do. I'm so grateful for the home that you've given us and so many other podcasters to get this information out there. So thanks so much for what you do, and thanks for being here.
Yeah, no, thanks for what you do. And I love, by the way, the idea of the Practivist. Every day on the Daily Beans pod, we give a good trouble homework assignment, and I'm happy to report we have crashed the ICE tip line. They are no longer taking any calls. You either can't get through, you get a fast busy, or they tell you to please go to the website. So thanks to everybody for doing their little tiny bits of good trouble to come together en masse and really make a difference.
I love that. Yeah, that's what the Practivist is. It's practical activism. Everyone has something that they can do, no matter who they are or what their skills are. But we all have a role to play in this, and it is, very, very important that we do it. So thank you for your incredible role, and it's always great to see you.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay, it's time for our listener engagement block. And remember, we love getting phone calls from you. And you can always leave us a message and sort of just tell us what you're doing, what you got up to this week. If you're, organizing something or feeling good about a project you're working on that's activism related, if you met with your representatives, if you're a part of a visibility brigade doing signs on a freeway overpass, whatever. Call us and let us know. 818-824-4286. And, but I'm going to read you a comment that I got from one of my newsletter subscribers because I like this. I think this is a nice comment for this week. This is from a person named Patty. And Patty said that she emailed the Harvard president and the Rutgers Senate this morning. She posted this yesterday because the Rutgers Senate passed a resolution calling for the universities in the Big Ten Academic Alliance to form a mutual defense compact in order to protect and defend academic freedom. And she heard back from Rutgers in 20 minutes, thanking me for the support and kind words, she writes. Also worth sharing for what it's worth in my round of calls today. Mine are all Democrats. The young man I spoke with thanked me at the end for being kind, calm, and well-spoken. This says a lot about what they're hearing. I also called offices for Sanders, Murphy, Cortez, and Crockett to say thank you for being loud and at the front. I'm going to try and do a few thank you calls every day. If I'm this exhausted and beaten down, I can imagine they are too. I mostly got to speak with real people today, not voicemail. That was refreshing. And I just love this little recap. Thank you, Patty, of your activism activities and her experiences. Her calling people and thanking them, I think is just, I can't stress enough what a great thing that is for us to do. Lawmakers and other people are motivated, I think, even more by praise than they are by scolding. Sometimes we have to scold, but when a lawmaker does the right thing, it is really good to praise them, especially at a moment as stressful as this. I know just from my little moment on that TikTok live when somebody asked me how I was and I just burst into tears, like even the people who are, and these people are way more out front than I am, but it's tiring and they're very brave. They're putting on a very brave face all the time, but they certainly have their own moments where they feel afraid and or exhausted. And so it's great. I love that she took the time to call and say thank you. Everybody appreciates it. It really can't be overdone. And also her emphasis on talking to staffers and being nice to them. We have to remember that staffers are getting yelled at all day right now because people are angry at their bosses. But it's a really important line to draw that we are courteous to the people we talk to while expressing our anger sometimes at the lawmakers they work for. So.
Absolutely. And I love the grace and the, making that call and being compassionate about exactly what we've been talking about a lot on the show today. My wife, Melinda, and I were talking about it this morning. I think we we always tend to put electeds up on a pedestal, as if they're these like higher beings because they do make these lofty speeches and these, statements about our greater purpose and they're doing a very important job. But they're people. They're just human beings. And they struggle with the trauma and the horrors that we're seeing. In fact, they're in it so much deeper than the rest of us. So a simple thank you and acknowledgement of that is really, really powerful.
Yeah, I agree. What is it? You catch more bees or you catch more flies with honey? I don't know. There's a saying. You all know what it is. That honey.
I think it's the flies. The bees make the honey, and then we catch the flies with it.
Right, exactly. That's right. And I don't know why you want to catch flies anyway, but I think you all understand the point. It's good to be nice.
Be nice.
Be nice.
Thank you for joining us today. Don't forget that all of the links for our actions are in our show notes, so don't just listen. Click those links and take action. Please do subscribe, rate, and review our show on Apple, YouTube, or wherever you find yourself listening. And share our show with your friends and family members. Make sure they are taking action to help us win. If you are able to support our show on Substack, we'd be really grateful for that. And you will get an ad-free version of our show as well. We will be back next week with some more Practivist Pod. So until then, don't forget, hope is in action.